if you don't already have a Google Earth Engine account, you'll need to go to signup.earthengine.google.com to make sure that you can get an account to continue with this activity. Now, just a reminder that it might actually take a few days to get this, so get started on getting that account nice and early. Once you've got your account, you need to go to a new web browser and go to code.earthengine.google.com, and you'll come directly into this browser interface. Yours is going to look a little bit different to mine because I have a lot of code that I've already been working on, so your left-hand side might be a little blank. Then we've got our scripting window in the middle here, and this right-hand side tells us how we're going as we're processing different things. Down the bottom, yes, centered in the US, we can always change that though using your mouse. You can pan around, and I've also got a scrolly wheel on my mouse, so that lets me zoom in and out. Now you can change that from a map view to a satellite view as well. So I always like looking at it as a satellite. Now what I'm going to do first of all is to zoom into the area where I'm going to start working. And for me, that's in Smithfield around Queensland. So I can see there's already a few other Smithfields here, but once I type in that Q there, that gets me to Smithfield, Queensland. Then I can use my mouse to zoom and pan a little bit closer into the area that I'm interested in. And this particular region here is James Cook University, which is where I'm going to do my work to start with. Now, to be able to work out the percentage of my university covered by trees, I need to work out two things. First of all is the area of my total campus, and second of all is the area covered by trees, and then I can work out the percentage. So what I actually need to do is to draw those things in and then do a little bit of maths to work out that percentage there. So the first thing that we're actually going to do is just do a little bit of drawing. And if you want to get tricky, you can also draw in the buildings as well. So let's get started here by creating the shapes that look like the boundary and the trees. So up in the upper left-hand corner here, I'm going to select this polygon tool because the boundary of my university is a polygon rather than a line or a point, and it's not perfectly rectangular either. So let's go with that polygon, and I'm going to click around the outside here, and what I need to do when I get to the end, then I can just double click to finish that shape. And you'll see there, that's the boundary, pretty rough, of my campus. Now you see up here, it's popped up and it's called it geometry, and you'll also see it in my script window here. I'm going to change that to boundary because that makes a little bit more sense. And I hit enter, and you'll see that that's now changed there as well. I can change the color if I like by clicking on the settings, and maybe I want to make that perhaps a sort of yellowish color as a background perhaps. And okay there. So there's my boundary as my first one. Now if I want to tick that off, I can, so that I can see a little bit more clearly what's below that. That's up to you as you like to do it. Now the next thing I need to do is to find my trees. So I'm going to go to new layer here, and up the top here I'm just going to change that to trees. And come back to my little polygon tool, and I'm going to start going around and digitizing my tree areas. Now I'm being a little bit rough, so if you're actually doing this to work out the exact area of trees and your campus, you might want to be a little bit tidier. But I'm going to go around and I'm going to finish my shape right there. And I don't really want my trees to be blue, so I'm going to change that, of course, to a more greeny color there as well. Now if I make a mistake at any stage, I can just use this little hand tool over on that left hand side, and I can click on anything and then use the delete button on my keypad to remove that if that's what I want to do. Now I've got a lot of trees on my campus here, so I've actually got a lot of work to do to draw around each of those tree areas. And so that's going to take me a little while. I'm also going to add a new layer for my buildings as well. So let's pop those in, and then I can start drawing out the buildings that I've got here. Spend a bit of time drawing all my polygons in, and you'll be able to see that I have my buildings there, my trees there, and there's my boundary in there as well. Now is a really good time to make sure you save your work. So you can go up to the save button here and make sure you give it a name that makes sense. So I called mine Map My School Code, and you see that that then pops up in the URL at the top so that we can always go back to that and we've got our shapes saved. Now comes the work where we get into coding so we can work out just how big our polygons are and what percentage of our school is covered by trees or shade. When we write code, it's really important to write ourselves little comments so we remember what we're trying to do. And in JavaScript, which is what we use in Google Earth Engine, we use two little slashes to denote the fact that this little bit of information I'm going to put in here is a comment. It's not a code that actually needs to run. So the first thing that I'm going to write is that I want to be able to navigate to exactly where I'm going to do my processing. So navigate to maybe the area of interest, and that's going to be based on the longitude, the latitude, and the zoom level. And then when I hit enter, here's my little bit of code. So it's saying center the map on this particular longitude, latitude, and the zoom level is 16. So a 0 zoom level would be all the way out at global, whereas 16 is nice and close. So if I was to run that code right now, let's test it by zooming out a little bit. And if I hit run on my code, I do that, and now we've zoomed in to exactly where I need it to be. I'm the right latitude, longitude, and I'm zoomed in nice and close as well. So that's great. I'm happy that my first bit of code works. And now this is also a really important part of coding, is that you only put in little bits at a time. So a small bit of code and then run it. A small bit of code and run it. And this is what we call agile programming. So in this way, we make sure that every piece of code that we put in works, rather than spending all day coding up all this stuff and then hitting run at the end of the day to find out there's errors all the way through it. The next thing I'm going to do is to find out the area covered by the boundary of my campus. So I'm going to pop that in my comments here. Find out area of boundary in meters squared, shall we? And here's my little piece of code that's going to work that out for me. So the variable that I'm creating is called the boundary of the area, and it's calculated by using this boundary term here, which is the same as our boundary polygon, and the dot area is the function that's getting called within Google Earth Engine to calculate that out. And then I've said that I want to print the words boundary area in meters squared and the value of bound area, which is this little bit here. So let's run that and see if that bit of code works for us. So it's calculating that area, and it's also going to reset the map center if it needs to, but I hadn't zoomed out, so it made no difference. And here's my boundary area in meters squared. That was pretty quick and easy, right? So now your challenge is, can you do the same thing, but for the trees and the buildings? So the code is very similar, but just make sure you change the value of that variable there. So instead of being bound area, it might be tree area or build area, for example. So have a go at that, see how you go. So here's the little bit of code now to calculate the area of the trees and calculate the area of the buildings. So you can see it is really, really similar to what we just did for the area of the boundary of the campus, but this time just for the tree or the building variable here. So let's give it a go, run it, and see how it works. So again, it's trying to reset the zoom center, which is already there. And here we go, we've popped up our boundary area, our tree area, and our building area. That's super quick, right? So now you should be able to figure out, even if you just use your calculator, what the percentage tree coverage of the campus would be, because it would just be the tree area divided by the boundary area. But let's see if we can do that in code first. So here's a little bit of code that I've just added. So remember to comment in to start with. So I'm going to calculate the percentage of the trees compared to the whole area. And so I'm creating myself a new variable. So that's what's just holding that information. So tpct for tree percent, it equals to the tree area, which is our little variable up here, our area in meters squared, divided by the boundary area. And of course, because it's a percentage, we want to multiply it by 100. And then we want to print our answer. So print tree percent and that variable tpct, which is up there. So let's run it and see how we go. We hit run, it reworks out the zoom, and then it's calculating all of those variables again. And I get my tree percent is 55.7, or round that up to 56%. So that's amazing. Think how quickly it just calculates that, and we haven't had to do any measurements after we've just drawn our shapes. So that's pretty cool. Now there's one more thing that I want to do before I then try and figure out how I'm going to graph this information as well. And so what I'd like to do is to find out all the stuff that's not trees and not buildings. So I'm going to call that the ground and see if I can code that in to figure out what's the area covered by my ground. I wonder if any of you would actually be able to figure out that code by yourself before I show you what it's going to be like. So if you want to have a go, pause the video now to see if you can work it out, and then run it and see how you go. So did you get it? Here's the new code. To calculate the area of the ground that's remaining in square meters, we're going to give ourselves a new variable, just like we've done in all these ones above. This time the variable is called ground area, and it's going to be equal to the boundary area minus the tree area and minus the building area as well. And then what do we want to do? We're going to print it to get our answer over in the console on the right. So let's hit run and watch those figures come up for us here. It recalculates our building, trees, boundary, and there we go, there's our ground as well. My final step was to create a print-ready map. Now I've done this in PowerPoint, but you could do it in any drawing package that you're comfortable with. Like any good map, it needs to have a title, a north arrow, a scale bar, a legend, and information about who created the map, the data they used, and the date that it was created on. I've also included a little location diagram of Australia so you can see exactly where my study area is, and a graph that shows the aerial coverage of the three main features that I was interested in: trees, building, and ground. So there you have it. There's my Map My School project.